Alan. Thank you, Alan. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Area 2 Planning Committee. For the benefit of those watching on our YouTube channel, members of the committee are present in the chamber and these members will be voting on proposals this evening. Other members of the council are also in attendance and are participating via MS Teams and can take part in any discussions, ask questions but cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted, including the ground rules. Your attention is also drawn to the rules of public speaking in respect of planning applications and committee procedure rules in the council's constitution, which apply to this planning committee meeting. We'd now like to take a formal roll call. So, Victoria, would you like to come?
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Banks.
Present.
Councillor Betts.
Present.
Councillor Borton.
I'm here.
Councillor Boxall.
Present.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Coffin and apologies have been received from Councillors Chris, Dean, Harman. Councillor Harman's participated in teams. Councillor Hudson.
Present.
Councillor Lark.
Present.
Councillor Roud is not present in the council chamber. Councillor Tanner.
Present.
Councillor Tatton.
Present.
And Councillor Taylor.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we'd like the officers to now introduce themselves, we'll start with Mr. Williams, who is to my right.
Hi, I'm Ian Williams. I'm the development manager.
Good afternoon. I'm Angelica Rocad. I'm filling in for Joy from Legal.
Victoria Freeman, Democratic Services.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Andrew.
I'm Andrew Longman. I'm the Senior Planning Officer in the Major Projects team.
Main man this evening. Yeah, is it? Yeah. Okay. Members of the public and the applicants or agent wishing to address the planning committee are present in the chamber will be invited to speak at the appropriate time with a time limit of 3 minutes for each application. So we can go on to, we've had apologies, other than that we're all present. Declarations of interest from anybody in the chamber? No, I would take that as a no. Minutes of the last 2 meetings, the extraordinary meeting held on the 18th of February and the meeting we held on the 9th of March. Can I confirm those as a correct record? Thank you. Okay. As of this afternoon, we had 2 items on our agenda. The first item of Grow Farm has actually been withdrawn, so we can move on to our second item immediately. That of St George's Court, West Street, Rootham. So, over to you, Andrew.
Good evening, members. So tonight's application is St George's Court in Rootham. So originally planning permission was granted under a 2018 application for the demolition and redevelopment of the existing buildings to provide 38 residential units with associated parking, refuse and cycle storage. This Section 73 application for consideration tonight seeks to vary the wording of Condition 22, the approved plans and documents of the original permission by substituting amended plans and documents to allow changes to the scheme, generally comprising of the removal of one home, layout and elevation changes, internal layout changes, and confirmation of the final affordable housing mix which is detailed fully within the planning statement addendum and design access statement addendum with the application. Members should note this is not an application for planning permission, but an application for the variation of condition or minor material amendments under Section 73 of the Town and Country Planning Act. Should it be resolved to grant planning permission tonight, the permission granted would be a new independent permission to carry out the same developments as previously permitted, subject to the amended conditions as detailed within the committee report. The original permission will remain intact. However, it is clear from the proposals put forward that Clarion intends to implement the proposals put forward before members this evening. A non-material amendment application to amend the description of development subject to a delegated decision is to run concurrently with this application. So therefore, the key issues for determination are the impact upon and acceptability of visual amenity, highway safety, surface water drainage, protected trees, ecology and biodiversity, residential amenity, housing mix, communities and the oral environment. So on screen at the moment, we've got the site location plan. The site is represented by the area outlined in red. It's an area of approximately 0.94 hectares, which is within the rural settlement confines of Rootham. It's bound by West Street to the south, residential properties to the east, north, and public footpath MR 235 to the west, with residential properties and amenity space to the other side of the public footpath. The site used to accommodate 57 two-storey dwellings in use as sheltered housing, which has subsequently been demolished to slab level. Built form was concentrated generally in the centre of the site with grass banks, trees and hedges at the periphery alongside 28 parking spaces. The land generally slopes upwards towards the north-west. In relation to constraints, just to give you an idea of what's on in the area, the Rootham as a whole is washed over by the North Downs National Landscape. You've got Rootham Conservation Area beyond Courtyard Gardens development to the east. It's approximately 75 metres away. There are mature trees on the south and west boundaries of the site, and they're subject to a group tree preservation order. There's also a foul sewer that runs into the site. So I'm now going to move on to some photographs of the site, just to give you an idea what the site is currently looking like. So these were taken in February this year. This photo shows the frontage of the site, the southeast corner, with the construction hauled in, currently surrounding the site. This photo shows the main access point onto the site. Then this shows the rest of the frontage of the site, where the established and protected trees can be seen. The vast majority of these trees are to be retained. The next photograph shows inside the site, the eastern side, where it can be seen that the existing buildings have been demolished to the slab level. Houses can be seen beyond the site. This is another photograph of the site showing the current state of works. The tree in the background is to be retained, but that isn't subject to a tree preservation order. Further houses can be seen beyond the site. Another photograph of the site. The healthy trees in the background of the photograph are to be retained. Those ones are subject to the tree preservation order. And now this is a photograph from the open space in Goodworth Road, which is to the west of the site. And then the final photograph shows the western boundary of the St George's Court site. It shows the boundary of the site from the public footpath. So now on to the changes that are proposed. So this slide on screen at the moment shows the layout of the development as approved. This permission has been implemented by the developer. I can come back to that plan if needed. So now we're going to move on to the site layout as proposed. A series of alterations are proposed, the majority of which can be seen on the proposed site layout plan. The first change, represented by the number 1 I've just brought onto screen, is the removal of one dwelling house, which is due to the existence of a mains water pipe. This reduces the impact of development upon trees and increases the amount of green buffer at the front of the site. Number 2 shows the resiting of a central proposed tree and removal of adjacent verge. Then I'm going to bring up numbers 3. This site will be subject to minor level changes, including stepped site levels and raised patios for apartments 3 and 4, which is represented by the number 3 on the screen. Number 4 shows the area where hard standing is proposed to be removed, with the resiting of parking and cycle and bin storage, which is going to safeguard the health of existing trees by removing areas of no dig construction. Number 5 shows the redesigned path, which removes an area of no dig construction, which will further reduce impact upon existing trees. And number 6 shows the introduction of rear garden access points for some plots on the site. Now moving on to some example elevations. These example illustrations show some of the other changes proposed, with the top elevation being as approved and the lower one being as proposed. The unit for removal is shown, but also the other changes can be seen: site levels, with altar building roofs being of a lower and step design, with roof eaves as well introduced. It's also proposed to alter the windows and doors, including the height reduction to windows and doors to account for building regs. These further comparison illustrations show some of the other changes that are proposed. Alongside changes to site levels, roofs and windows and doors, it's also proposed to replace 2 windows with a single window on house type 2, switch the site heating to air source heat pumps, remove low-level porch and brick walls and porch posts. They're also going to mend the scale of the dormers. It's also proposed to undertake minor internal changes to some homes to improve the energy efficiency. These changes have been assessed within the committee report and are considered policy compliant and acceptable in relation to the various material plan considerations outlined at the start of the meeting. The conditions of the original permission have been reviewed, and these have been strengthened and updated in their wording, which shall provide the low LPA, the residents and the applicant certainty as to what is required under the conditions, being necessary, relevant, enforceable, precise and reasonable. Conditions are tightened in relation to cycle and bin storage design and provision. The scheme is considered a particular betterment in relation to landscaping, design and trees. The eaves detailing on these houses with step roofs makes them more visually appealing. This permission will have less of an impact upon trees than the extant permission, with the LPA having more control over the tree works and the landscaping as a result of the revised plan conditions. The amended landscaping and tree works represent a major benefit of this revised scheme. The revised plans also ensured all plans match, which was not the case for the extant permission. For example, the tree protection plan did not quite tally up with the site layout plan. Now onto the main change, which is the amended housing mix. So just on the screen, you've got 2 comparison tables for your reference there. The approved tenure mix was for 28 shared ownership properties and for 10 affordable rent, with the accommodation mixes per table 1 at the top of the screen. The legal agreement set out a minimum number of each type of each property, being 15 affordable housing units, comprising of no less than 10 affordable rented and 5 shared ownership properties, which represents policy compliance scheme. It is proposed to amend the tenure mix to comprise of 11 shared ownership properties and 26 affordable rents, with the accommodation mix as per table 2 on screen. That is 70% affordable rented and 30% shared ownership. The amended mix includes the flats as affordable rent rather than shared ownership, with the majority of 2-bed houses being shared ownership rather than affordable rented, with all 3-bedroom houses proposed as affordable rented. The legal agreement will remain as drafted. The proposed development provides more than 40% policy requirement under policy CP17. Split of housing according with that policy. Therefore, the amended development is acceptable in this regard to the development plan. And national policy is clear that a scheme of solely and mainly affordable housing, including affordable rented, should not be precluded from being supported despite the promotion in the NPPF of mixed tenure sites. The proposed tenure of predominantly affordable rented should therefore not be resisted. Nevertheless, it has been noted that this is not proposed to be a single tenure site, as it's proposed to comprise of both shared ownership and 26 affordable rented properties, which is a mixed tenure development. It is acknowledged that Rootham has a higher number of affordable rented properties than the average for the borough. However, it is common for there to be a variation in tenure amounts across a borough. Tunbridge Moreland Borough has higher than average levels of house prices and larger than average levels of home ownership than the national average. So therefore, the average levels of the borough is not typical and representative of the national average. The addition of a further 16 properties compared to the extant permission is not considered to be a significant increase. It cannot therefore reasonably be considered that the provision of a further 16 affordable rented properties compared to the extant permission would result in unacceptable impact upon the existing community of Rootham and achievement aims for diverse and healthy communities. Furthermore, in relation to the concerns raised regarding antisocial behaviour, it should be noted that just because someone resides in an affordable rented property does not mean they will cause antisocial behaviour. You cannot consider that prospective residents of the affordable rented dwellings at St George's Court would cause antisocial behaviour, with such arguments being contrary to the public sector equality duty under the Equality Act 2010. Additionally, whilst there are reports about antisocial behaviour in Rootham, these issues are caused by only a minority of households, who are not all Clarion residents. It has been confirmed through liaison with the council's antisocial behaviour officer and in liaison with Kent Police that level of antisocial behaviour in Rootham is low. They have no particular concerns regarding antisocial behaviour in Rootham, and the issues raised are a general issue across the borough, which is not specific to Rootham. There are therefore no reasons to resist the developments in relation to healthy and balanced communities. And concerns regarding Clarion's dealing with tenants' behaviour and covenants are not material plan considerations and cannot be used to determine the acceptability of the scheme tonight in front of you. Paragraph 66 of the NPPF expects a mix of affordable housing for 4 major developments to meet identified local needs. So therefore, we look at the draft local plan, specifically the strategic housing market assessment, which it can be seen that the Tunbridge Moreland Borough, there is a dire need for affordable properties in all sub-areas. There is particular need for rented properties as opposed to affordable home ownership. So the proposed amended development therefore strongly accords with the strategic housing market assessments, delivering a much needed housing product for residents on the council's housing register. In relation to the home ownership, shared ownership product proposed is accords with the strategic housing market assessments. Therefore, the provision of these properties and the resultant amended tenure mix is substantially supported by the local housing needs evidence and is more aligned with the current needs of the borough than the extant permission. Within development, there'll be more flatted provision within the affordable rented tenure. However, this is considered counterbalanced by the provision of 11 3-bedroom family houses, which are a priority need in the borough and a desperate need for people on our housing register. So overall, the amended affordable housing provision at the site is considered to be greatly improved compared to the approved developments, providing a mix of affordable housing that meets identified local needs across affordable rented and affordable home ownership tenures, delivering much needed affordable housing for the residents of the borough. It does this in a manner which will not conflict with providing and achieving strong, vibrant, healthy communities in Rootham. As such, it accords with the core strategies, policies, the TNBC's corporate strategy, and the relevant paragraphs of the NPPF. Members are advised that the revised affordable housing mix, comprising the more affordable rented, is a strong major benefit of this application. So overall, as illustrated this evening within the committee report, the proposed variation in the wording of the planning conditions is considered acceptable in all respects and will not result in unacceptable impacts upon visual amenity, highway safety, surface drainage, protected trees, ecology, resi amenity, housing mix, communities and the overall environment. The scheme is considered a particular betterment in relation to affordable housing, landscaping, design and trees, with the affordable housing being a strong, significant benefit of the proposal. Changes do not affect the fundamental principles established by the original permission. It is therefore recommended that planning permission be granted, subject to a deed variation to the legal agreement, plan conditions to ensure that development comes forward in an acceptable and high quality fashion, and formatives to bring some relevant information to the attention of the applicant. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andrew. Before we have our speakers, I draw your attention to the supplementary that was issued today, which I hope you've all seen and taken note of. Did anybody need to look at a copy? No, okay. Okay, right. We have our first speakers, and our first speaker is Councillor Peter Gillen from Parish Council, Ruthven Parish Council. And bring some water with you if you want to. Bring some with you, yeah. Previous development for the before it was demolished. Can you do that as part of your speech, or is that not? Right, okay. No, we can't, yeah. Sorry. If you want to press the red button when you're ready and start, I will start your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. WPC asserts that ASB in the village is not caused by social rent tenants per se. It results from poor placements and mismanagement by Clarion Homes. Over the past 2 years, the Housing Ombudsman has recorded multiple cases of malpractice by Clarion in managing ASB across the South East, particularly their failure to support vulnerable victims. We note that the Centre Village has 23% Clarion social rent tenants, and the TNBC average is 15%. We are concerned that this site, next to the existing Clarion developments, proposes a further 70% affordable tenure. Residents' crime and ASB are reported by Police 101. An arduous process, and community policing is stretched thin. It's not surprising victims exhibit reporting fatigue. Ruthven's Crime Diary, operated by volunteers, utilises WhatsApp and email and receives many more ASB complaints as a result. Paragraph 135F requires planning decisions to create safe places where crime and disorder and the fear of crime do not undermine community cohesion. The officer depends on a borough-wide assessment for housing needs. Paragraph 66 requires that housing should address local needs. By conflating Ruthven's need with those of the entire borough, the LPA fails the local requirement of the policy, especially as we have a disproportionate number of Clarion-managed homes. Paragraph 8B aims for sustainable development by creating strong, vibrant and healthy communities. Adding more high-density affordable housing to a rural village already dealing with ASB is considered unsustainable development because it disrupts social cohesion. The officer alleges the applicant has an extant consent for 38 dwellings, which can be built irrespective of this application. This is not correct. The application includes a dwelling located directly over a main sewer. This breaches both the mandatory building regulations and the statutory easements, which require unrestricted access. The current application proposes reducing the development by one house. Among other amendments, this essentially admits that a 38-unit scheme was over capacity due to the site's constraints. In Mansell versus Tunbridge and Morling, a case that officers know well, Lindblom established that a fallback must have a real prospect of implementation to be a material planning matter. The 2018 consent is fundamentally flawed. As a result, the harm of the 38-unit scheme cannot be regarded as the baseline.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn.
Thank you, members.
Our next speaker is Councillor Harry Rayner.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of Area 2 Planning Committee. The site formerly occupied by St George's Court, Rootham, has been the subject of repeated planning applications by Clarion Homes and their predecessors for 10 years. Following significant protests by local residents protesting at one of these over-intensive applications, Tunbridge and Morling Borough Council arranged for what was a very well-attended meeting at which Clarion Homes senior management attended, together with local residents and all local councillors, where Councillor Matt Bolton chaired the meeting, if memory serves. After that meeting, agreement was reached between Clarion Homes and Rootham Parish Council, representing local residents, including those with a continued freehold covenant interest in this site. The development plan was agreed, and those residents agreed not to exercise their legal rights against Clarion. And I'd like to thank Kim Tanner, without whose valuable assistance that agreement would not have been reached. She was at the time she had the cabinet portfolio for housing at Tunbridge. There's a very significant issue of antisocial behaviour. But let me just return. The application before you is, in effect, Clarion Homes welching on that agreement. The local community finds such behaviour in a housing provider by working with taxpayers' funds wholly unacceptable. There's a very significant issue with antisocial behaviour on the Towerview estate, Rootham, at which this site forms part. Your colleague, Councillor Des Kears, working with the community security contractors, significantly funded by both Rootham Parish Council and Tunbridge and Morling Borough Council, do the best that they can, but they are hampered by the poor quality of Clarion Homes management and their utter failure to provide substantive support to the many new residents to whom they offer tenancies. Often such tenants are from urban environments who find themselves cast adrift with no close family on an isolated rural housing estate with practically no facilities. I want to turn now to the situation with freshwater. The position is that Rootham is now struggling. Very rarely now does a quarter go by without freshwater issues at Rootham, and particularly on the Towerview estate. Freshwater is constrained, and in fact, it would be fair to say that the local water supply company has recently put Tunbridge and Morling Borough Council on notice that it is unable to supply new facilities going forward. I've urged you, Madam Chairman, to your committee to vote against this.
Thank you, Councillor. Right. Councillor Betts, you called this.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I start my
do apologise. I am jumping ahead again. I do this I'm very sorry. I do this regularly. We have the agent like to join us, Mr. Walker. I'm running away with myself.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening. My name is Sandy Walker, Development Lead at Clarion. I would like to thank officers at Tunbridge and Malling Borough Council for their continued engagement throughout the process. We fully recognise the history of this site, the level of local interest, and that there are differing views from the local community on the proposals. We have worked constructively to respond to feedback and are pleased to be here today with a recommendation for approval. Our proposals secure the long-term future of a site that has remained vacant and stalled for a considerable period. Clarion is fully committed to delivery, and the scheme will provide clear and lasting benefits to the borough and the Rootham community in 3 key ways. Firstly, delivering much-needed affordable homes. The scheme will deliver 37 high-quality affordable homes, making a meaningful contribution to addressing acute housing need across the borough. 100% of the homes are affordable, with 26 for affordable rent and 11 for shared ownership. Now, importantly, there are also an ongoing collaboration with the council to secure the right tenants through a local lettings plan. And this aims to prioritise over 55 provision, local connection and economic activity, helping to create a balanced, stable and integrated community that complements Rootham. Secondly, the development will be better and more sustainable. We have improved the quality of homes through small adjustments to design, landscape and sustainability enhancements. And these include the removal of gas boilers and the introduction of air source heat pumps, ensuring the homes are more sustainable and energy efficient. Enhanced public open space with carefully delivery-focused adjustments to layout, parking and pedestrian routes to protect existing trees and biodiversity, including the planting of 17 new trees on site. And thirdly, and critically, this is a scheme that will be delivered and gives the council and the community confidence that redevelopment can begin without delay. The site has been hoarded and vacant for a significant period, and our proposals provide a betterment to the existing consent and an opportunity to bring it back into beneficial use. We have made necessary adjustments to ensure deliverability and designed a scheme that responds positively to its context and have a contractor already engaged and ready to commence work on site later this summer, following the discharge of pre-commencement conditions. We have listened, collaborated closely with officers and responded to local feedback to bring forward a policy compliant and deliverable scheme. Our proposed amendments will ensure a more efficient, better designed, high quality homes are delivered. The proposals will continue to deliver 100% affordable housing, delivering tangible benefits to the future residents and the local community. We look forward to working with the council to ensure the right tenants are found for each of these homes via a local lettings plan. I'd like to finish by thanking members and officers again, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Could you just take that switch for me, please? Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Bents, stage 2. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chairman. Second stab. I've made a few notes on this, as you'd expect. Before I go into those notes, I would just like to pick up. There was a few comments made by the chairman of Rootham Parish Council I'd like to pick up on and maybe cross-check with Andrew. He cited about the overcapacity of the site on the previous application, bearing in mind that this new application has had to be reduced by 1 unit. I'm just wondering what your comments or what your thoughts are on what was raised by the chairman of Rootham Parish Council on that fact. Thank you.
I think he was saying that the permission wasn't extant because it was 38 units and that they need to remove the unit because it was over a main sewer. The applicant has implemented the permission through demolition. So demolition is a material operation which allows you to retain a planning permission. Now, it may be the case that it may be difficult for them to develop over that main sewer, but it may well be the case that it increases the cost, but it doesn't mean that that planning permission is not extant. All you need to do in terms of making your permission extant is to discharge the pre-commencement conditions and to make a material operation, one of which is demolition, is a material operation. So by demolishing the existing buildings on site and discharging their pre-commencement conditions on that permission, it's an extant permission. Whether or not they have to make changes to that permission, possibly through other amendments to make it buildable. That's down to the applicant, but it's still, as far as we're concerned, an extant permission.
Okay, thank you for your clarity on that. So in terms of, just to give other members a bit of context about this development, this site, who may not appreciate the time that's been put into this to try and get to where we are now, which has been extensive. I won't go back too far because, as has already been mentioned, we're looking at some 12 years now. So I won't bore the committee with going back to year one. But I think what was massively relevant was the 2022 meeting with the director of Clarion, and with obviously Kim Tanner as cabinet member for housing attending that meeting, and indeed the leader of the council, Matt Borton. That meeting was pivotal in terms of trying to move forward with a positive development of this site, which is what everybody wanted, the community wanted. Movement on this, bearing in mind the time it's taken sitting idle, and indeed the parish council wanted that, and indeed cabinet member for housing wanted that. So to try and put more context into this to where we are now, at that meeting, it was difficult, but eventually we did get to an amicable position with the community, an amicable position with Ruton Parish Council, and indeed an amicable position with the local borough members. And we strive forward with an acceptable mix and development mix for this site, which was all agreed by Clarion. And we thought we were getting somewhere. And bearing in mind that the history of the site, that it was originally a development that was maintained just for the elderly, and that was obviously relinquished. That didn't go down well with the local community. But we've moved on. And within that agreement, it was to look at retaining provision for 9 units for the elderly still. And that was an agreed acceptable position along with the other tenure mix. That hopefully gives members that aren't familiar with this site just a bit of context to the history. Now, what's been happening since then, obviously demolition has taken place, and we were minded that we were now moving forward in a positive way. What's really, really frustrating is then at the 11th hour, Clarion coming with an amended application. Now, the frustrating thing is that all along this is that we've been banging on about communication with members, communication with the local community, communication with Ruton Parish Council, and that's been really tough. But it's sort of been crystallised now with this application where there was no communication with either members, Ruton Parish Council, or indeed the local community. So that's put me as a local member in a really difficult position now. And it's a position I didn't really need to be put into if there was communication. Now, once that application came live and was validated, I then pushed as a member to try and get communication with Clarion to assess this new tenure mix, and invite Clarion to communicate with the community and indeed Ruton Parish Council. They accepted that invite and they were willing to try and do that. Sadly, they didn't do that. So it's just exacerbated a position where that lack of communication, renegading on the original agreement, which was a tough one. It was tough to get the community behind the original agreement of tenure mix provision for the elderly. Bearing in mind, the community were losing a valuable asset, which was the original development, which was restricted just for the elderly of Ruton. That was a massive community asset that they lost. And so you can imagine that the feeling behind this is strong. So to get to a position where we did finally agree a mix for this site, we thought we could move forward. Sadly, we now have this fresh application, and my reservations are sort of crystallised actually by the two speakers, both Councillor Rayner and obviously Councillor Gillen. The ASB, I can fully appreciate. I wasn't sure because I know Andrew has been updating me on ASB through the police records. But now I hear from Chairman of Rooton Parish Council the difficulties in reporting ASB through 101 service and indeed the WhatsApp service that they're clearly running as a local community seems to be where a lot of the ASB reporting is coming to. And maybe that hasn't been analysed easily by Andrew because it obviously is a local WhatsApp group that record this. So that's a worry to me. Looking at the current mix, concern to me is that Rooton Village already holds, I think it's around about 23% affordable housing, as opposed to 15% as an average across the borough. It's already a high number. I'm not saying that necessarily social or affordable rent tenants create antisocial behaviour, but it's probably more about how Clarion manage those tenants, not about the individual tenants themselves. I want to make that clear. But the trouble is, when we have a high percentage like this already, as opposed to the borough-wide percentage of around about 15, you can already see that Rooton is way, way above the borough-wide average. The other issue I get with this is that it seems to me that we're looking at this application in isolation. Now, when you start looking at, I've been doing a bit late mine, but I've been doing this afternoon a bit of research into NPPF and how that supports developments such as this. And when you read into the NPPF, there is massive support for balanced communities, strong, well-designed communities. And that's why I feel this particular application fails, particularly when you look at outside of the area of the development site. And I think for this particular application, you have to do that. You can't just look at the application solely on its own. You have to see how this type of accommodation fits into a village. And let's face it, Rooton is a very small rural village. Okay, so these are important facts to take into consideration, especially when you've got a community behind an old renegaded proposal. This makes life a lot more tough now. The other issues is that with the ASB reporting and how it's recorded, I'm trying to see how that fits into how that's supported through the NPPF policies. And that's where it gets a little bit muddy here because of the different two reporting streams that we've got. That makes it a bit awkward. In terms of how we've got to where we are now, as I said previously, the idea was that we should be meeting Clarion around the table to discuss a way forward with a mix that would support a more balanced community for Rooton Village. And sadly, that hasn't happened. So I think overall, what we've got here in front of us is something that will go against certain paragraphs of the NPPF policy. Now, I'm minded that we've got a housing policy, and indeed, as a housing policy, this ticks the box. Certainly ticks the box, the housing policy. But the only trouble with the Tunbridge and Malling housing policy is that it was last revised way back in 2007, which is an enormous gap in time, whereas the NPPF was only revised last year. So my mind is working towards that we've got a very outdated housing policy, which technically this application does tick the box for, but we've got a revised NPPF policy where I think it fails. So we've got two elements here of policy that are hitting each other. Now, with my local connections and how I see Rooton as a village, a very rural village, in my view, the more latter NPPF policy is the one I'm looking at the moment and how it supports Rooton Village as a community. And that's where I'm sort of hanging my hat in terms of the NPPF policy supporting a balanced, strong, well-designed community. And I think this development will tip Rootham over that edge, bearing in mind the percentages already there in affordable housing. And I think Clarion, as it stands now, owns in excess of around about 150 odd properties within Rootham. And that for a small village is huge. So I just think they need to be minded of their strong presence in Rootham and their strong presence in owned accommodation that Clarion do own, and minded that with a fresh development like this, they should show more empathy towards the community, and respect the agreements that were made back in 2022. Anyway, I'll listen to other members. Thank you.
Councillor Tullen.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say I'm hugely disappointed to see this application come through to make such significant changes to what was agreed. I believe there's been several changes of personnel within Clarion since the meeting that everybody's spoken about, and that's unfortunate because you had to be involved with it to acknowledge the level of feeling within the local community about this particular area. Yeah, we all sat there in trepidation, actually, while we listened to residents and their feelings that were so strong about firstly, the lack of action by Clarion for, I think it was around about 9 years at that point, and then the fact that the local community were very happy for that development to remain as for the over 55s. So, as it's been said that there was a huge amount of effort that went into bringing about a compromise, and the local councillors worked tirelessly with the parish council to come to some sort of arrangement that suited all parties. I have to say the loss of shared ownership properties here is hugely disappointing. Andrew referenced that there's a high cost of purchasing properties in our borough, and I would have thought that makes it even more important to offer shared ownership. We have to help people onto the property ladder because we do have a higher than average cost of properties in this area. And the original agreement back in 2022 was to retain 9 units, as Robin has mentioned, that were going to be for the over 55s, and that seems to have completely disappeared. So for me, I think there's a significant lack of integrity in changing the tenures at this late stage and after so much effort in bringing about an application that was acceptable to all. And so for that reason, I can't support this. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Long.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm a council house kid, and I've long been concerned at this council how application after application comes forward and developers weasel out of their commitment to social and affordable housing on the grounds of viability. That really annoyed me. But I'm in a curious position now of finding myself leaning towards voting to refuse an application for affordable housing. Now, I was a freelance youth worker for a decade, and I wasn't your touchy-feely KCC approved politically correct youth worker. I was the one that Kent Youth used to parachute into the awkward spots, building youth clubs and skate parks and things like that. So I know Rootham well as the local youth worker. Rootham has suffered for decades because it is a tiny rural village with a humongous social housing estate bolted on the side, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. And that's already been mentioned that has caused problems. They lost the 50-odd elderly accommodation, and that wasn't just a loss to Rootham, that was a loss to all of us because we had friends and relatives from Borough Green in there. And I've watched this application stumble through its process for the last 12 years. And I think it is wrong. And I think we should refuse this on the housing mix and on the crime and antisocial behaviour. And I also pick up on what Councillor Rayner said about water supply. I mean, at this moment in time, although a lot of the water outages are finished, houses in Rootham are still suffering from water shortage and low pressure. And the problem is that we're being told that because this is a 2018 application has already been approved, we can't do anything. 2018 is 8 years ago. There's an awful lot of houses have been built in the meantime that have taken up the water supply destined for this development. And that's Clarion's fault for dithering about so bloody long. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Lark.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Robin has made incredible points. I mean, I represent wards where there are villages, and I have one village which is in a very similar predicament to this, with a very large group of social housing. And it does come with its problems, and it does affect the village. A village is a village is a village, and they have a very singular identity. And by changing the housing balances, the whole identity disappears. And I just think that having made very difficult, obviously, and strenuous agreement to make by Kim and Robin and Pat and Harry and everybody else, that to welch on it at this stage is just it's treachery. And they know full well, as has been said, they've got 150 houses. They must know what that is. But do they really care about the balance? Possibly not. I mean, it is a business. They are in business. I know they have a social conscience. How far that extends is not up for debate at the moment. But I think that, as Kim has said, shared ownership is aspirational. It gets people on the property ladder who won't otherwise get on the property ladder, and to remove that from lots of people. And that shared ownership actually changes the village back to being a village community again. Because if you own a property in a village, you're part of the village. If you're merely a tenant in the village, you're just in transit a lot of the time. So I'm sorry, but I have to agree with what he described as the council house kid over there. I have to agree that I can't support this. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
Last July, I was in Liverpool. I sat on a panel at Clarion's invite. How can we, I can't remember what the title was, but it's something like, how can we unlock homes in our communities for the future generation? And in front of a lot of very senior people from Clarion, I said you could get on and develop sites like St George's Court. And I effectively gave the example of St George's Court to lots of housing professionals that were in the room as an example of where I feel there are housing associations that are housing associations first and foremost, but are also developers who could crack on and get on and do it. And someone came up to me at the end who didn't work with Clarion but had local authority background and gave me an example of something similar happening elsewhere in the country and said, the problem we have here is that essentially we know what the housing association wants to do, but the model isn't necessarily perfect for small rural villages. And I think that's the heart of the complaints that have come forward from the local representatives this evening. Now, I remember very well the meeting at St Mary's Church in Rootham in 2022. I remember kind of having to step in halfway through it and chair the meeting because the chair was incapable of carrying on, shall we say. Let's leave that there. And passions were very high, and it was very well attended, and there were lots of people who really resented very deeply what had happened in terms of the move out from the existing site. And I think it's shameful for Clarion to have left this site as long as they have. I also think we worked exceedingly hard at the time to get that permission in place. for the demolition. Kim and Robin and I were there when we started demolition, and we all thought happy days. And yet we've had, and I think a change of personnel has caused it, because fair play to the Clarion representatives at the time. They were very good and they were very honest, and they made a commitment that they wanted to deliver it. And then whatever happened with Clarion, we're dealing with another bunch of people within the organisation. And the upshot of all of that is that we've ended up in a position when they have decided to change tenure mix, and clearly communication has gone wrong, very badly wrong. And with all respect to the gentleman from Clarion here, who I've never met before, I don't include him in the good or bad that I mentioned, because I don't know. But I think part of the problem is the way that Clarion are structured is they haven't had someone devoted and dedicated to getting the redevelopment of St George's Court in Rootham done and dusted, and working with the community to design a scheme, which is what we would advise any developer to do anywhere where we've got a brownfield site, which frankly, from a spatial planning perspective, is in urgent need of regeneration. Like, the houses should be built, in my view, at St George's Court. We see so many applications on green belt or greenfield or grey belt or whatever it's called. This is a pure brownfield site. The principle of development should happen at St George's Court. I think what's also gone wrong through the process, because of what I've just mentioned, is things like the challenges in getting this application even here today. I don't really want to take any words out of Andrew's mouth, and I might say things that he may agree with or disagree with as a case officer, but when you're leader of the council, you get brought into some issues, shall we say, and one of the issues was simply getting the documentation from Clarion to us in time for reporting to stay in line with the PPA. So that doesn't give much confidence either. And I had to write to them shortly after Christmas to kind of re-emphasize the points that had been made. However, we do have a problem here, which is, if this application is refused tonight, do we throw baby out with the bathwater? What actually happens next? Because if Clarion turn round, I'm genuinely undecided about what I'm going to do tonight. If Clarion turn round and say, well, hold on a second, this is not viable. We have to make changes anyway, because we know one of the units can't be built out, so that has to be changed. The other changes beyond that Andrew ran through with the numbering earlier, beyond the tenure mix, I think all sort of are fine. But if the tenure mix is unviable, what happens next? Does the site just stay empty for another 12 years? Is that good for our housing trajectory? Is that good for Rootham Village? I'll pose that question. I won't answer it, because I think that's something that this committee needs to consider. We could be part of a further delay if that is indeed the case. If the committee's minded to approve, then I have a question in relation to condition number 10. Now, St George's Court, when occupied, had a covenant or a range, I can't remember what covenant, a condition, whatever it was, that said you have to be over 55 in order to receive tenancy of one of the properties. Now, to me, it's very, very clear that an application through condition 10 needs to have not a local lettings plan with a local connection to the rural west area under our housing policies. That is good. That is welcome. That is reassuring, because we know it will be the local housing need from Rootham and the surrounding villages that will be catered here. But I would be interested to see whether that could be strengthened in terms of over 55s at condition 10, because that way we could turn around to the community and say, well, actually, this is as close to as it was before. Whether that's within our gift as a planning committee, I'm not sure. But what I'm effectively trying to suggest here is a way in which we can bring St George's Court back to its former glory days. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you, Andrew, want to come back on that before we have our next speakers, or would you like to? Okay.
Thank you for your comments. So I'm assuming it's the informative, not a condition. Informative, thank you. And would your concerns be addressed by the informative number 11, which references older people's housing, or was that not? Thank you.
If I may, Chair, I would say I get why older people's is in there, but when do you get old? I mean, I'm 33 and I think I'm old. So I'd be applying for older people's houses. So I think personally, as it's informative, we should stipulate over 55s, because that was what happened on site when this site was occupied before. It would also rule me out of one, which may be good for the neighbours.
Yeah, if you decide to approve tonight, it is your gift to change any of the informatives conditions. So we could very easily put in there over 55s after older people. So yeah, so yeah, you put the end of it to be prioritised for for people over 55 or a set age, whatever you recommend. Yes.
Okay, I have Councillor Tatton on next.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, to say I would very much support that to include the over 55s. I have a relative who lives at Waterside Court, which is Clarion owned in Leybourne, and we've seen this creep away from the over 55s. It was sheltered housing, and it's just sort of gradually pulled back. So just even if it's only an informative, to see that on there sets the right tone, I think. But I would say perhaps I take a slightly different view to other colleagues, and I agree with what Andrew was saying really earlier, is that we need to be very careful not to make assumptions about what residents' behaviour might be, and you know, relative to the different tenures. In East Malling, actually, there is an estate. Well, I've only got a chance to check one before I came out, but in fact, the Winterfield estate, where we've got the garages that should be redeveloped, where nothing has happened yet. But that is getting on for nearly 60% social rent. I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's not without its problems, certainly, but I wouldn't say that part of East Malling or East Malling generally is not a cohesive community. So I do take issue with some of the things that have been said. I think if there are issues with ASB, and I walked around the estate with Clarion just the other week, you know, and I'm sure other members do, but it's up to us to some extent to push Clarion and to push the police and to make sure these things are addressed, and not try to address it by, you know, we have residents say to us all the time when planning applications come forward, where's the social housing, or you're not providing enough affordable housing. And then we have this come forward this evening and we're saying it's not right. I'm inclined to support the recommendation, frankly. But what I did want to pick up on is I think the agent was talking about a certain percentage being economically active within the local lettings plan. Is that right? I wonder if that would give some reassurance to some members or to the parish council. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on?
Yes, so the application will be accompanied with a deed of variation to the section 106, and as part of that, there will be a nominations agreement for people specifically within PMBC and also and Rootham as a local community. So that housing market area for them to have first pick, as it were, of the affordable rent and the social and shared ownership. So that would be within the 106, and Barring would be obliged to give first dibs, as it were, to those people.
I've got a number of people coming. Do you want to come back, Councillor Tatton?
Does that include a percentage being economically active?
It would be anyone who's on the housing list, so that would include people who are economically active.
Okay.
So it's not just solely people. So the affordable rent can be for people who are economically active or possibly just on benefits as well. It's not you're not restricted from either, essentially.
The affordable rented that is proposed, it's not social renters, it's not effectively the most affordable form of affordable housing that can be proposed. So effectively what the affordable rent is, it's typically around up to 80% of market rents, and that includes service charges, and that's the 80% of market rents in that housing area. Or social rent is typically around 50% of market rents in the housing area. But yeah, affordable rent is what's proposed on this site, because through discussions with Clarion, it hasn't been tested by us, but they've advised that social rent does not work for them. It's the affordable rents that they can justify on site.
Okay, I have a number of speakers now. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When I first got involved in local government a long time ago, there was a councillor that'd been on the council for about 30,000 years. And he said, it's a very similar debate to this really. He said that it doesn't really matter what type of houses you're building or the tenures, it's the matter that you're building. I think we really do need to get this site built now. It's been hanging around for such a long time. And I like the alterations that you've done to it. But I share my concerns with Councillor Tanner, for example, about the mix. And I think it's really disappointing that we no longer have family houses available for shared ownership there, because there'll be residents living in my ward that are renting at the moment. They'll be looking forward to buying a shared ownership scheme. I know friends that have done that, gone from rental to shared ownership, and then indeed have bought more of it and then moved on out of that to somewhere else. So I'm really disappointed about the removal of those shared ownership schemes. But I don't want to throw the baby out of the bathwater either. I think we really do need to get on with this, and whether or not we can look at a deferral for this and give officers time to have a recalibration and reintroduce those shared ownership schemes, that could be a possibility. But I don't like the mix that we've got at the moment. I think the original mix, which was agreed all those years ago, was good then, and I think we should keep that. Thank you.
Councillor Bents, there are a number of other speakers. Do you want to come at the end, or do you want to come in now?
If it's okay if I come in now, then maybe at the end as well, Chairman. But I just wanted to pick up a few comments that were made by a few other colleagues. In terms of, yes, we have been waiting a long time for this. And in some ways, it's a little bit of a converse way of looking at this, in the fact that, yes, we've been waiting for so long now. We've almost got used to waiting for so long. And on that basis, whilst I too want to get development going at this site, just because we've been waiting 12 years doesn't mean we rush into something now at the last minute on a 10-year mix that is certainly not supporting a balanced community of Rootham. I completely agree that we want affordable housing. There's no doubt about that. We do want affordable housing, but I'm going to add a caveat here: across the borough. Okay, that's important. Rootham has its fair share of affordable housing, 23%. The borough has 15%. Now, surely members can see here that when you come forward with a development like this, it's even more so important to get that balance right in this development. And I'm saying to you, I'm not against affordable. Of course I'm not. I'm very much in favour of affordable. But what I'm saying here is that you can't look at this application in isolation and just say, this is a great application. It's got 100% affordable housing. Because it's not in isolation. It's in a very rural, small village of Rootham, which has 23% affordable housing. What this application should be is more about shared ownership, which would support Rootham, get families on the ladder, not keep putting people in rented accommodation that by the time they get to the end of their working lives, they're completely at the mercy of whatever government is in power at that time. We need more shared ownership. People keep banging on about they can't get on housing ladders. This is a great opportunity to push shared ownership rather than just going full down 70% affordable rent. I'm not against that, but all I'm just saying is Rootham needs a balance. That's all I'm saying. And what Clarion are coming forward with in terms of development and the quality of the development, I applaud. But just get the actual balance right that suits the community, taking into account Clarion already own 150 homes in Rootham. You know, that's all I'm saying. So, Clarion, come back to us, work out a plan that will work for the community instead of just throwing stuff at us and not talking to us. That's what I'm trying to get, what I'm trying to get across. I mean, in terms of, I'm going to say this again. A number of councillors have referred to ASB tenants. That's not the case here. And I'm not making a reference to that either. It's not about the tenants. It's about how Clarion manages the tenants and how they manage balance in communities. And that's where I see this with another application like this, bearing in mind they're not really managing the tenants very well as it is. And bearing in mind, and I say it again, Rootham has 23% affordable. For a small village, that's colossal. And when you've got a Clarion, when you've got a housing provider that's not managing their tenants as well as could be, this is where the problem lies. Okay, so it's not just one thing. It's not just we don't want affordable housing in Rootham. We've got a lot of affordable housing. I'm just saying, let's just get the balance right. And bearing in mind, we've been waiting for 12 years. Why rush at this last moment in time just because Clarion put in an application without talking to us when we've had massive talks back in 2022 to agreed and came to an amicable position? Why at the 11th hour come with an application like this that will destabilise Rootham? That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. In my ward, Clarion do have some 3 groups of flats, and they historically have always been for the over 55s. Unfortunately, as happens, we do pass away, and those vacant properties were then homed with younger people, and it completely changed the makeup of the community within those flats. They have now returned to more senior individuals, and it is a far nicer place. But whilst it wasn't, we had a crack cocaine addict, her drunk alcoholic pimp, and a prostitute. And the ASB in the village was really racked up rather high. They're now all in prison, and things have all quietened down. And we now do have, as I said, older residents who are appreciative of their surroundings and appreciative of the fact that they have a home. It's not difficult sometimes to walk into newer areas of the borough and know exactly where the social housing is because of the unfortunate way that they deal with their property. They don't take care of it. That, you know, you have piles of rubbish outside their front doors, and it's just a shame that they abuse the situation that, you know, that they are given to actually give themselves a home. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Banks.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've great empathy really with local members that have actually tried to get some local engagement on a project like this. And I think that's the thing that I find toughest, because I think if I'd gone to the trouble to do that, and then basically a little while later, the developers to come back with something completely different from what was accepted by the local population, I can see the annoyance. And I think the whole thing is in future planning. I think the way forward is that is early consultation to try to get more agreement, and this really hasn't done that. So I think it's a situation that I think something needs to be changed on this. I don't want to get into the argument over shared ownership or renting, because I think there is a need for both things, and you can argue it either way. I think there is a need to get this done, but I think there is a need basically to take into consideration what the local residents have actually said at that meeting in 2022. They may not get exactly what they wanted back in 2022, but I think at least we should actually something should be changed to actually to try and make sure that we get some acceptance of the situation.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you for letting me come back. I just wanted to pick up on the point that Councillor Betts made, that it's not the tenants so much as the fact that Clarion won't manage those tenants. And I just wanted to chuck into the mix that I know Ruton Parish Council have moved heaven and earth to try and get Clarion to manage their elements of this antisocial behaviour and have failed. And nothing more I can add than that.
Councillor Boxall.
Thank you, Chair. Taking on all the points that Councillor Betts said around the mix, I think in his opening statement, and trying to understand that, and I do agree with the point Councillor Bolton makes around the age part. I just want to ask probably the more obvious question, and I can't find it anywhere in the documents, and forgive me if it's in there, but can you explain to me what consideration has been given for the creation of a balanced and sustainable community? Because it seems like it's very disproportionate in Ruton. And with this application, and in line with, I think it's paragraph 8 of the MPPF, what consideration has been given?
You want to come back, Han? Yeah.
Right, so the assessment of the basically balanced community has been undertaken in the report, and it's set with it's based in accordance with the MPPF, paragraph 71. So effectively, I'll just quote from that one. So it says the mixed tenure sites can provide a range of benefits, including creating diverse communities and supporting timely build-out rates. And local planning authorities should support their development through the policies and decisions. Although this should not preclude schemes are mainly or entirely for social rent or other affordable housing tenures from being supported. So that's the baseline we look at. So the MPPF says it's great to have mixed communities, but then it's also we can't stop having we should not stop supporting schemes that come in entirely affordable. So on that basis, I've then gone into the report and I've looked at the tenure that is proposed, and it is a mixture. It is not just rented. We've got a mixture of rented and affordable home ownership, which calls with the 70-30 split in our policy, but then increased to cover the entirety of the site. That policy is MPPF conformance, based upon that the document where we've gone through and reviewed each policy in the core strategy to ensure that it accords with the MPPF. And then I've gone through looking out at consideration of the issues of the antisocial behaviour within Ruton, but I do not consider that an increase in the number of units that is proposed would unbalance the existing settlement of Ruton. If you look at the overall percentage of houses, the percentage increase would increase the amount of affordable rented, but it wouldn't be a significant increase that would be considered to unbalance the community in any way at all. You couldn't reasonably argue that. So that was my consideration of that.
Thank you, but you would argue from what Councillor Betts said, it's already unbalanced. So we are adding more to the unbalance of that.
Come back.
I'd also just like to point out that the policy in respect to affordable housing expects 40% affordable housing in any new development. Now, that's hypothetical in that we know that that doesn't come forward on every scheme, but if it were to, and every scheme was policy compliant and didn't need to be viability tested, then you would get schemes where you'd have 40% affordable housing split in your mix 70-30, which is what you've got before you here. So the fact that I appreciate that Ruton probably does have a slightly higher proportion of affordable housing than other areas, but the council's own policy says that we actually expect 40% in all new development going forward. And I appreciate that, you know, from a baseline where there probably isn't any affordable housing, but it's not significant. It's not a significant number that we're looking at here to tip it over into an unbalanced community. So I think that's something else that we need to consider.
Councillor Bolton, I've got you next, but our legal representative would like to have a word first.
Biding my time to make sure I pick up as many legal issues as I can, but there's just a couple of points which might simplify the debate going forward. One question was what it is happens to the original site, as it were, in the original application, because members are being asked today to deal with a Section 73 application, which has been outlined as a new application, as it were. It's a new application for permission. That doesn't mean old permission dies away. Developer retains the choice to implement as has already been done, the original permission, which is extant, or choose to go down with this Section 73 application if members were minded to approve it. So in answer to, I think, one of the queries was, will this be a vacant or an empty site? Matter, unfortunately, for whoever the applicant is, I'm afraid, to develop whatever scheme it chooses to do so. Unfortunately, the planning rules are such that a scheme must be implemented in order to prove that a planning permission has been sort of developed upon or is extant. Implementation in this case has already in relation to the original. So this developer or applicant retains the right to implement the original scheme or this new Section 73 scheme where members minded to approve it. So that's just one. The only other 2 points I think it might be helpful just to explain in terms of affordable housing. Just to be clear, there is no legal definition of affordable housing, but Annex 2 of the NPPF does make that point clear to say that affordable housing includes market level rents up to 80% and social housing up to 50%. So the percentages quoted by sort of conforming with the NPPF. Just the third point is that there was mention made to a legal. Very much. Hopefully you can hear me now, but there was mention made to a case called Mansell and the extent to which members are entitled to consider that as a quote fallback position. Apologise if I'm saying something that members are already familiar with, but just to be clear as to that, Mansell is a case whereby the court was asked to consider the extent to which a previous scheme on the same site ought to be considered separate, a material consideration for a new scheme that was being proposed. Exactly the same situation that members are asked to deal with. The question about fallback, just so I can deal with this quickly, really, and not take up too much time for debate for members, is that a fallback scheme is the original scheme in this case. So you are entitled as members of the committee to put weight, if you wish to the original scheme, the extent to which the original scheme differs or does not from what it is before you. But just be mindful of the actual decision in Mansell, which basically said that it can be a material consideration, something to consider for this application, if you are minded to accept the proposal, that it's not a theoretical chance that this planning permission will be implemented. In this case, bearing in mind that planning permission has already been implemented, there is no theory behind the subject, as it were. You are dealing with a realistic prospect of implementation taking place. So I just wanted to clear up what Mansell actually meant in accordance with this application. I hope that isn't too legal or wordy. But I come in now before there's any further debate.
I also have some comments to make, but Councillor Bolton first.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Ian stole a lot of what I was going to say, which I was going to reference our own policy, which is 40%. How can we substantiate a refusal on the grounds that it would make the village unbalanced when Rootham has 23% affordable housing, when our own policy is 40%?
Yeah. Okay. So our policy, can I just clarify that? You're saying our policy is to have each village 40% affordable housing?
Policy is 40% affordable housing on new developments. Now, if you were starting from Rootham again, if there was no housing in Rootham and you would build a development the size of Rootham in Rootham, then 40% of it would be affordable housing if it was given planning permission right now. At Rootham is currently 23% affordable housing, and this is and Ian, I think raised a really important point on that, and that's what I'm sort of struggling, because you know what I'm like, Chair. I like to sort of get into the detail of stuff, and I just think that's a really important question that we need to have an answer to, because that's the challenge that comes back at us, which is we're articulating something here for Rootham when our own policy for new developments is very different and in excess of that. And that's why I posed the rhetorical question, because I just think it's something that we as a committee need to consider how we overcome that.
Is shared ownership considered to be part of that policy? So therefore, does that includes in affordable housing?
Because of course you've got 70-30 in terms at the moment, it's 50-30-20, which is obviously where you need to look to go through from the local plan, and that's shared ownership, affordable rent and social rent. I've got that the wrong way round, but still, so shared ownership is considered affordable for the reasons that Chris said, actually, because it's effectively the half a step up on the housing ladder, and therefore, but then we're looking here at effectively a 38 unit scheme in a village the size of Rootham. So I may be overcomplicating matters. Please criticise me for that if that's appropriate, but I struggle with this, our 40% policy and our 23% in Rootham, and how we can marry those two things up, as Ian said, much more articulated.
If we have to look at the numbers on this site as well, don't we? Because in fact, all of it, if you include shared housing, all of it is social housing, or not social rent, but the whole of it is affordable. So that's 100% of this site. So of this sort. Yes, the fallback is the whole fallback is 100. Well, in fact, it's all 100%. It's depending on the mix of the 40%. What I was going to say is I was also at that meeting in 2022 in the church, and there was a commitment, verbal. It didn't get written down at that time, that Clarion would make some spaces for the over 55s, because that was the idea that people within that community could move when they needed to downside, but remain within the community, remain within their friends and their family, still be within the community, but that would free up the larger houses in the site for families to come into. Sounded like a great idea. So disappointed when what we got was not anything like that at all. It is, really, really disappointing that every time we have to bash our head against a brick wall where Clarion is concerned to get anything done. Again, I would agree with you on the communication on every front, that they just do not want to talk to us because I feel that they think they can just go ahead. My idea on this is, apart from the mix of the housing, everything else in this plan, the actual build, the actual thing is fine. It is basically the mix of when they are built, what goes into it. So is there a way that we can approve it so that it's allowed to go ahead into build process, but reserve the mix for further discussion? Is that a possibility? Sorry.
So I'd just like to remind members that obviously 38(6) of the Planning and Compulsory Act 2004 requires you to determine a planning application in accordance with your development plan unless material considerations state otherwise. So obviously at this moment in time, we've got a policy compliant level of affordable housing, which is policy compliant in terms of the tenure mix. So it's then down to members to find out, well, what are the material considerations that make it unacceptable? Now, in answer to your question, Chair, unfortunately not. I would love to be able to, delay negotiations further down the line on stuff and allow stuff to be built out. But at this moment in time, we have to secure the affordable housing via the 106, and we cannot enter into a 106 after issuing a decision for planning permission. The two are inseparable. So you read your 106 with the planning approval. So the options really are, well, the options are either committee is minded to approve the application. Otherwise, if there are material considerations which you consider contrary to the development plan, and like I say, I mean, there is a demonstrable need for the affordable housing, so that adds weight to it. The fact that we don't have a 5-year housing land supply adds further weight towards the housing. That these material considerations have to be, in my personal opinion, fairly weighty. The other option is obviously if members aren't quite satisfied with the tenure, to defer and possibly allow officers to go back and renegotiate. Those are the three options that unfortunately the committee has put forward. I think
Andrew, would you like to come?
Thank you. I just want to clarify that point on that. The legal agreement isn't to change. It is remain as drafted. What you're considering is the tenure mix within the application, and the baseline, that's 40% of the overall site is to remain as drafted, which is 70-30 split within that. And what Clarion are coming today for is just to show you the overall mix of the entire site, and that is what is for consideration today. Just with that point, on there, I want to come back to a couple of things that were mentioned. So with regards to the reference to Clarion and that, we've just got to view the application as just an application tonight. We can't base our assessment based on what you may think is going on with Clarion, etc. You can't be biased to certain different applicants. You have to keep that. You have to be neutral with that point. With regards to, bear with me. With regards to the mix of housing that's proposed, it is strongly supported by the evidence we've got at the moment. So the strategic housing market assessment undertaken in support of the draft local plan does set out that the desperate need in the borough is for the rented provision. That is where the need is. There is not so much a need for the affordable ownership properties. And that's where the evidence base shows the need is, and it's potentially looking at the policy may need to change when it comes in to effectively show a higher percentage in developments coming forward, higher percentage towards the rented than shared ownership and similar products. So I would ask members just to consider that in their considerations tonight, because if you do want to go back and change the mix, but the mix is already really supported by the evidence. So it's, I'll ask where is your evidence to change that mix as well. And yeah, and I thought I'd just say as well, with the scheme that's brought forward tonight, yeah, it's just supported by all the evidence, and as well with all the other considerations, you have to bear in mind as well the issue with the trees. And so the design is a great benefit of the scheme. Also with the trees at the moment, the trees as approved, they can just do it in accordance with the approved ARB reports. But we've done our conditions differently this time. So they've got to come back with a further ARB report, a further tree survey, because we want specific details to secure the green frontage to that site, because it is within the North Downs National Landscape. That this provides that more security there. And same thing with a lot of the other matters. So yeah, I just want to put all those matters out of full consideration. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, I have seen you come up. Can I ask a question? I know it was an informative on 11. How strong could we make that to encourage the over 55s or an older representation in there, so that it would, yeah, it would go back?
I think you can change the wording of it completely if you want to, and I can check through it, and we can agree alternative wording with that. But I think hopefully that Clarion are getting the point that that is a key area for consideration, the key area of contention amongst members, that you would like to see older people's housing on that site, and that is the key thing on there. And I hope that's being drilled back into them tonight. You can see the discussion, they can watch the re-watch this on YouTube, that is the key point that we come back for tonight. So we can make that strong. We can't hold them to it, I must add, because it's just an informative, but hopefully they get to the point tonight that that is a key thing on there, that you try and focus that on. And also with the extant scheme that's currently in, there is no such informative on the current scheme that's been implemented on site. There is no such informative, and they can just continue building out with that one. All they need to do on that site to avoid the thing that's stopping them at the moment is they would just not build the 3 units that goes over the sewer, and they come with a separate application for a semi-detached units on that individual patch if they want to. That's a potential route forward.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Well done, Andrew. It's a better application. I think it's definitely better. It's just the tenure mix that we're getting hung up on. And bearing in mind that they've already got planning permission with the tenure mix that we're happy with, it's causing us a lot of concern. Now, if there are more shared ownership, we go back to those more shared ownerships. People can move from my community that currently rent and move and buy there, which frees up the rental accommodation in my ward, for example. So I don't see it as a loss. I think it's a potential benefit. And I know none of you were here, but when we agreed Kings Hill Phase 3, I had a similar argument with that. I wasn't happy with the tenure mix. And we agreed the outline planning permission for Kings Hill Phase 3 for 650 houses, and discussions continued with housing and planning and me after the outline planning permission was granted. I know it's an outline planning permission, this is a detailed one, but we did it then, so I don't see why we can't agree planning permission for this tonight, as we've seen, with further negotiations to go on between housing and the local members to iron that tenure mix out. I really want to give this planning permission and I really want to get going, but I understand what local residents are saying and I want to make sure it's right for such a small little community in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So I just want to say with the product that is there, I deal with major developments across the borough, and that we can get shared ownership quite easily amongst developments. That is the product that is more financially viable for your bog standard developer. We can get it on there. We struggle to get rented provision. We're struggling on all our major sites to get that rented provision because the RPs are struggling to make things stack up on the sites financially. So the provision on this site of more, that's why my argument is very focused on its key benefit of getting the affordable rented properties on this site, because that is the thing we're struggling to get. We've got other sites within the borough, Rootham, there's another site on there where the potential will be no affordable rented provision on that site. It would be completely shared ownership if there is affordable on that one. That's currently being determined. On other sites, I'm very focused on with, we're able to get the shared ownership product in, or other similar products such as discounted market sale. We're able to get those on because they work financially for developers, the big builders. It's just difficult to get that affordable rented product in there. So on this one occasion, I think we really should be grasping this on this one site and taking this product we desperately need, because Breeze being on there, I talked with housing colleagues, we're in the same directorate, we work in the same area, and there is that desperate need for the family homes. And this product now, this site is now including, I think it's about 11 3-bed family homes on the affordable rented tenure. That is desperately needed. There's people on our housing register who would love to move into those properties. That's a desperate thing we do need. So if I would ask you to consider that. So effectively we can get shared ownership quite easily on other general development sites, those big ones, but for us to get a 100% affordable application in with such level of affordable rented is highly supported by housing colleagues, and it's something which I ask you to support tonight on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor Betts.
I believe Councillor Tanner wants to speak, so I'll let Councillor Tanner speak first.
Councillor Tanner.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to highlight the fact that we've got many apartment blocks that have been built, new apartment blocks that have been built across the borough, and nobody bids for them. I have to tell you, they're sitting there empty for so long that we have to then give up on our local lettings plan and allow people from outside of our borough to come in and rent those properties. So I'm afraid I don't agree that building flats at Rootham will attract people to bid and move into them, whereas shared ownership flats will attract people. Thank you.
Betts.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to pick up a few points and then I'm going to put a motion to members. Councillor Boxall sort of hit the nail on the head, really, in terms of this little village of Rootham and how the imbalance is already there. Maybe I didn't emphasise that point well enough, but Councillor Boxall did. We're looking at 8% above borough average. That as a percentage of the borough average is 50% higher than the borough average. So whilst some colleagues may say it's not a lot, it's only 8%, as a proportion of the borough average, it's massive. And in terms of for a little old Rootham village, that's just a small rural village, it's huge. So I do disagree that this is just a small above average figure. It's not. It's a massive above average figure. And again, I emphasise to colleagues, I'm not against affordable housing, but what we've got here is that we've already got a massive amount of affordable rent in Rootham. What we need is now a balance of affordable housing in this development via shared ownership, and that's what we're not getting. You know, and I look at housing policy of 2007, which is well outdated, but then I look at NPPF that's only revised last year, and I start looking through the powers that will support Rootham Village in this application, and it fails at so many. It really does. So I think the only way forward here is to refuse this application based on the more relevant and up-to-date NPPF policy, and then encourage Clarion to come back swiftly, engage with local members, engage with the community, engage with the parish council, and come up with a scheme that we can all support and move on swiftly. That's what I really want to encourage here. So on that basis, I'm going to move a motion to refuse on quite a number of what I see, looking at this afternoon at how NPPF connects with this application. So on the grounds of refusal, I will cite paragraph 8B, a social objective to support strong, vibrant and healthy communities by ensuring that a sufficient number and range of homes can be provided. I emphasise range of homes can be provided to meet the needs of present and future generations, and by fostering well-designed, beautiful and safe places with accessible services, open spaces that reflect current and future needs and support communities' health, social and cultural well-being. That's paragraph 8B of the NPPF. The second one, I'm sort of doing this in order of importance in my mind, but they're all relevant nonetheless. NPPF 135F. Create places, again, that are safe, inclusive and accessible and which promote health and well-being with a high standard of amenity existing and for existing and future users, and where crime and disorder and the fear of crime do not undermine the quality of life of the community cohesion and resilience. That's an important one. And again, I'm emphasising this is not ASB connected with the tenants themselves. It's just ASB connected with that we've got so many affordable rented properties in Rootham that Clarion aren't managing correctly. That's refusal motion number 2. Number 3, I'm going to bring up the water issue now. This might be a little controversial here, but SQ5. As I see it, there is no assurance from South East Water that they can meet their obligations to supply this site. And a reference to the letter confirming this position from South East Water that was received on the 3rd of February 2026. And then the final one, which is NPPF paragraph 66. Where a major development involving the provision of housing is proposed, planning policy and decisions should expect the mix. Again, I emphasise the mix of affordable housing required meets identified local needs across social rent and other affordable housing for rent and affordable home ownership tenures. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask for a seconder, are you seconding? No. So seconder by Councillor Taylor. Would anybody else just like to speak before we go to a vote on that proposal? Oh, Ian.
I would just like to understand. So when you write a reason for refusal, you've got to give the sort of way that you write it. So it's what element of the development's unacceptable, why it's unacceptable, what harm it provides, and what policies it's contrary to. So from this, I understand the policies, I understand what element of the development is unacceptable. I'm just looking at what is the harm of, and sort of you link in the mixed and balanced communities, but what is it about it that it's going to cause harm? That's what I just need to sort of get out of it, if it's going to be a reason that we can run with, essentially.
Councillor Betts, yeah.
Okay, the harm that I can identify here is the fact that Rootham already holds 23% of affordable rent provision. And on that basis, by increasing on top of the already 8% above average affordable housing rented accommodation in Rootham, I perceive that as a harm under paragraph 8B and paragraph 66. That's where I'm linking this harm. That massive increase in affordable rented provision in Rootham, based on the fact that it's already got a 50% above average, taking into account borough average, 50% above borough average affordable rent. That's where I see the harm coming in.
Are you happy with that, or do you want to come?
I'm a bit uncomfortable with regards to the water issue, because it's already a extant permission, so they've implemented it. It's not, they've got that fallback position already, so they could continue to build out what they do have at this moment. So it's not as if it's a new development coming forward where, as it were, you need to demonstrate that sufficiency. I think it's one where, because they've got the fallback, they can do it. It would be a bit of a difficult one to argue, really. I'd just like to suggest.
I've got two people would like to speak on that one. Councillor Brown.
Well, just an observation, and obviously take legal advisor's advice. But the planning permission was granted quite some time ago, and we now know that there's a significant water issue, which is in the public domain. So when the facts change, Madam Chairman, I changed my mind.
Councillor Betts.
And to add to Councillor Brown, you're quite correct in, of course, and I understand where you're coming from, but I would just add that obviously back then when the application was submitted, what we see on the previously developed site is that we've got somewhere in the region of a 25% increase in demand, bearing in mind the increase of numbers of people actually residing at that site under this new application. So there will be a 25% roughly increase in water demand, and obviously taking into account Councillor Brown's comments, that obviously we're now aware that as we stand right now, there are severe water shortage infrastructure problems. Thank you.
Mr. Williams.
I understand that, but the other thing that we need to consider as well is that the site before they demolished had 55, I believe it was 55 units. And when you look at a single, but it's similar to possibly, as we may have discussed earlier on today, Grove Farm, where there were a significant amount of single units on there and they reduced it to a number. So again, I would say that this site has already been taken into account in that water demand because it had development on there. It did have occupants there. They've also got the fallback position of the permission that they've got at this moment in time. So again, I would say that particular one would be a very difficult one for us to defend, because it's not a greenfield site where we're adding new development. It was an existing site that had a supply of water, and it was connected, and it was drawing on the water supply.
I've got the legal team would like to come back, and Andrew, would you want to come back after? Thank you. Yeah. Oh, okay, Andrew.
I also just want to point out as well, there's a reduction in one unit compared to the extant scheme. So it's actually one reduction less. So they could go ahead, build this scheme out and draw on water. So I'd say it's quite a shaky ground refusal, probably. With regards to, I think, the number 66, paragraph 66, I do have reservations about it as well, given the council's evidence based on the strategic housing market assessment. So I'd say you'd need to have counter evidence to against that to because that's about where major development involving provision of housing is proposed. The mix must meet identified local needs. Well, our local need is demonstrated in our strategic housing market assessment. That is the document we always go back to with all our plan decisions. So you would need your counter argument against that. You'd need to go against that document. With the 135F, that's primarily aimed at design and layouts of developments primarily, and the fear of crime in relation to that. Yeah, the balance in the community, yeah, I'd say they're quite shaky grounds. With regard to, just want to also come back on to Kim's comment about the flats provision on there. With regards to if we got those moved over to shared ownership, the only concern I have about that is potentially on-site. Those are the only ones that would be suitable for the older residents. So obviously you'd have the ones that are less able on the ground floor, and then have the more able ones, the young ones, the 55-year-olds on the first floor. So if we did change the mix on that, I would be concerned where would the older person's provision go on site, because I think the other houses are 2 beds and 3 beds, and that probably wouldn't be suitable. So I just want to bring that up as well. Thank you.
Councillor Tunner.
I take your point, Andrew, but there was only 9 properties for the older generation. So I'm not sure how many that would allow for on the ground floor, but it is a fact that the local lettings plan and our promise to provide housing for local people is in our manifesto, and it's actually being diluted all the time with new developments that include apartment blocks. I just think it's quite important to stick to what we promised in our manifesto wherever we can. Thank you.
Can we come to the legal department first, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So just 2 points. The first is that with regards to our local plan and our housing plans, until and unless that is found to be, quote, out of date by a planning inspector or a court, it is considered by default to be in date. I know that the date is pretty old, but as a matter of law, it is in date until it's proven to be out of date. So as of yet, there are, as far as I'm aware, no local plans or development plans within this borough which have been considered for the purpose of this application to have been found, quote, out of date, noting the time that we're talking about for the policy. In terms of the MPPF, it's recently been revised, so that MPPF in terms of time frame is up to date, as it were. December 20, I think it's 25, that was the most information, or 24. So in terms of chronology, it is the most recent up to date, but that doesn't suggest that our local or development plans are out of date. Only just to clarify that. And just finally, as with regards to the Southeast Water issue, that's a recent issue which has arisen. I'm mindful that the original application obviously approved a long time prior to water issues been now recently put in focus, as it were. I don't have the details that letter Southeast Water has put forward, so I don't know what it is the specific issue is, as is it current future units that are proposed to be developed from 2025 onwards, or is the issue that relates to pre-2025 developments that haven't been implemented? But either which way, this developer has the right to develop what has already been granted. So to the extent to which there is a fallback position, which is a material consideration, it would be a material consideration regardless of the water issue, although that water issue, I'm personally not clear on the details about where it relates.
Thank you. Right, I've got a number of hands. Do you want to come back at the end, or yeah? Councillor Bourne.
The water issue we can't use for the very simple reason that it relates to the Water Resource Management Plan 2024 onwards, and planning permission was granted in 2022. So
yeah. Councillor Betts.
I was just going to amend my motion to
Okay, like I say, I was going to go over the motion before people voted. So.
withdraw SQ5. Anyway, but para 66, I, being courteous, but sort of have a different opinion in the fact that the local needs are being met by the numbers of units that Routham already holds. So the local need stroke borough need, in my view, is being met, because we can't be looking at this application in isolation. And based on that, if you look at the locality of the application, then under para 66, my view is that the need is already being met in affordable rent, and it's on that basis that I'm using para 66 in terms of the mix of affordable housing. Okay.
Okay, so I have a proposal on the floor for refusal on the grounds of paragraph 8B, 135F and 66 of the MPPF. Shall we be taking a vote on this now? So if you agree with refusal, Mike's already seconded. Yeah, we've been there. If you agree with the refusal, it's agree. So we'll do a roll call. Sorry, we can do a show of hands. Yeah, okay. If you agree with refusal on those grounds, please raise your hand. And a refusal refusal of the refusal. Yeah. Against the refusal. Against the refusal. So, you got those numbers? Could you announce the numbers, please, Victoria?
That's 6 in favour and
With people on YouTube, that's 6 in favour of refusal and 2 against. So that motion is carried. Sorry, 3 against. So that is carried for having refusal of this. Just do a roll call. Do a roll call.
Councillor Palmer,
I am for the refusal. So
Councillor Brown, Councillor Banks,
Against.
Councillor Betts,
Or
Fortin, Boxall,
Four.
Councillor Hudson,
4.
4.
Anna,
4.
Against.
Councillor
4.
8. Again.
So for the YouTube, that's 8 in favour of the refusal and 4 against. Again. Okay. So we have no urgent items. I do not have any public appeals, planning appeals information. Can I just say that the only reason we've refused this is because of the mix. Now, I would, if there can be some discussion between the officers and Clarion regarding the mix, I would be very happy to have this back very quickly to let you get on with the building. Yeah.
While the YouTube is still going, because I was involved in writing to the chief executive of Clarion in order to get this application to the committee today. I'm very happy to facilitate a discussion between and for Clarion representatives in the room and anyone who may be watching online, between Robin and Martin as local members and Clarion and the parish council to resolve this matter, because I'm very much of the view that this evening tonight would not have happened had Clarion engaged better since 2022. It's that simple, I'm afraid. And I shall endeavour to do that because I've just made a promise.
Totally agree with that. And I hope you've taken that on board. There you go. Okay, so no other urgent items, no exclusion of press or public. I will close this meeting at 8:30. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. Good night.